Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I'm the author of The Snowball System, and I and my teams have trained over 15,000 experts all over the world on sound, efficient, effective, science-based, authentic business development techniques. And I'm here for my last episode where I'm interviewing Dorie Clark. We have had a great time. I laughed a ton and learned a lot in the 3 episodes before this. And I'm going to do a recap episode on everything I learned after this one. But in this one, we double click on habits. I asked Dorie, somebody who's exceptionally good at doing the deep work to build a brand, at playing the long game, which is the name of her upcoming book. And I ask her, how do you make time to do it? How do you advise others to make time to do it in this crazy, busy world that we're in right now? And her answer was fantastic. So that's coming up in a sec. But before we get there, don't forget that if you want our best and brightest ideas, our greatest practical tips, our newest thinking on how you can grow your book of business, grow your relationships, and grow your career, head over to growbigplaybook.com because the newsletter is called Grow Big Playbook. Head over to growbigplaybook.com. Sign up there. It takes a few seconds. You won't regret it one bit. And once you sign up there, we're going to drop weekly insights into your email box. And in like 3 or 4 minutes to read the newsletter, you're going to come up with a new idea every week that's going to make you more successful. So here we go, our last interview with Dorie Clark before I do the recap episode in the next one. But here we go. I can't wait for you to hear what Dorie Clark tells us about hacking our own habits. Hey everybody, it's Mo Bunnell, your host here at Real Relationships, Real Revenue. I have just had a ball hanging out with Dorie Clark, talking about her advice around a big idea to help you with your business development skills. If you haven't seen that first episode of 4 that we're doing with her, and then 1 is a wrap, make sure you do that. We talked about how do you bring in more business specifically? How do you develop relationships specifically? And check this out. I've got so many notes. I had to go get a new card to take more notes in learning from Dorie. So here's our last question of Dorie. I think it's really an interesting one. Dorie, you know so much around developing entrepreneurs, about standing out in a crowd, about finding your big idea and building a brand about it. You've got a new book coming out called The Long Game. Tell us how people can hold themselves accountable in their busy world of getting distracted all the time. How can people hack their own habits and keep doing the things that you've been telling us about?
Fantastic question, Mo, because of course it is true. Many of us know what we should be doing, but it becomes a lot harder in the implementation because we are busy. We are pulled in a million different directions. And so actually in The Long Game, one of the places that I start, the very first chapter, is about this question of why exactly we're so busy. One of the really arresting statistics that I read in the course of my research is that 97% of senior leaders said that strategy is one of the most critical aspects of their job. And of course, that's probably not surprising, right? A senior leader, right? They need to set the strategy. They need to be smart about that. Meanwhile, a separate study said that 96% of senior leaders said they didn't have enough time for strategy. And just if we think about that for a minute, if we zoom out, we realize, okay, literally almost everybody except for 1% of people said that one of the most important aspects of their job, they don't have time for. What is going on? What is possibly going on? I mean, yes, there's a lot of meetings and emails, but come on. So one of the very first things that is important is that we actually, I think, have to get honest with ourselves, because the truth is, as I sort of discovered in the course of writing this and researching it, many of the constraints of busyness are actually things that in some ways we are putting on ourselves. Now, of course, it is true you are busy. You have lots of things, lots of obligations, but there is actually, for many of us, a culture of busyness that, and research by Columbia University has shown that busyness, especially in Western societies, often equates to self-worth. And we feel better about ourselves if we're busy. We often use busyness as a way of distracting ourselves sometimes from difficult questions about what I should be doing, or where's my life going, or should I actually be in this job, or whatever it is. So really facing that and saying, okay, what would it look like if I actually didn't feel like I had to be so performatively busy, is one question that I've actually been grappling with a lot myself personally. And I think as we also go through and really get clear on, well, what is important? What do we want to be doing? Another strategy that I wanted to mention that I talk about in the long game, which is coming out in September of 2021, is about the power of pre-commitment. And this is something that is really a useful tool. I mean, we first, if we go back to Greek mythology, we know about it in the Odyssey, when Odysseus is strapping himself to the mast because he has heard that the sirens are, so their sound is so captivating. Everybody just commits suicide basically by throwing themselves into the water to get closer to sound. What does he do? He stuffs his ears with wax preventatively because he knows that he is going to be tempted. And so similarly, how can we set up structures in our lives that actually help push us to better behavior? I mean, obviously hiring a gym trainer is one of the most classic examples of this, but are there accountability groups? Are there just even an accountability partner that we can use? How can we strategize? There's a woman that I profile in the book named Kim Cantor-Gianni, and I love her story. She decided she wanted to finally get serious about weight loss. And she actually did a pound-a-thon, she called it, with her friends, where they agreed to pledge a certain amount of money for every pound that she lost to a battered women's shelter. So she really felt like, oh my gosh, if I'm going out with people, if I'm like out in town, I cannot afford to be seen with the Snickers bar because I'm literally letting down battered women. Like if you create those structures for yourself, it enables you much more easily to make the habit of good behavior rather than bad patterns.
I want to double click on this because I think it's really powerful. I loved all the stats you shared, the 97 and 96%. I love this idea of the power of pre-commitment. So double click on that. Put yourself in the shoes of a busy professional, a consultant. They've got one foot in delivery of some big bunch of projects that have been purchased, and they've got one foot into they've got to focus on business development going forward, but they just feel overwhelmed. They're working 80 hours a week. How could pre-commitment help that person, that extreme example, just do as much as they potentially could squeeze in during this busy period so they don't emerge from the other side and haven't done anything over months and months and months?
Absolutely. Well, oftentimes it's about thinking what is even more painful than doing the thing you're supposed to do. So I'll give you an example. For a lot of us, especially, responsible, high achieving professionals, we really hate to break commitments. And so if you were to, if you have an assistant, you can have an assistant do it. You can do it yourself. But if you were to proactively set up networking lunches, let's say, or a Zoom call or whatever, and you do it 8 weeks in advance, you have it on the calendar. And in the moment, you might feel so busy. Oh, I can't do it. And then you realize, oh God, I'm going to have to cancel. And like, they're going to be insulted, or even worse, I have to cancel and then reschedule. And whoa, when am I going to do it? I don't have any time. It's easier to just do it. And you will find the time. You will make the time to do it. We all are familiar with Parkinson's law that the work will expand to the time that we have to fill it. And so if you have carved out the hour or the half an hour previously, it often is much easier to just go ahead and do it rather than play cleanup and spend another hour trying to reschedule it. And so if we do that, we can actually enforce and reinforce the good habits that we want to have.
I love that. In the idea of setting up ahead of time, it'd be a whole lot easier to continue those dialogues with other clients, keeping the relationship warm, being helpful, all that kind of stuff. That's a whole lot easier to squeeze that in during the busy periods than emerge 6 or 9 or 12 months later and have talk to anybody like, hey, I was really busy. I really didn't care about you. And now I'm back. That's not a good message. That's almost harder. So I love this idea. Let me ask you one last question on this topic, and I'll ask a closing question about how people can connect with you. But the last question is one thing we found that's really helpful in some coaching that we were doing is while we were going through all this like mental gyrations with somebody trying to help him figure out, or a small group of people trying to figure out what was less important than business development. We're like, well, this is important, that's important, everything's important. But when they would do business development activities early in the day, the rest of the day would just sort of sort itself out, right? And I feel like maybe that's a pre-commitment idea, is if you do the hardest or long game kind of things first, the rest of the day will sort itself out. Is that an angle to this too?
I think that's great. Absolutely. Yes, because it's like doctor's appointments, right? Like if you're going to have a doctor's appointment, you usually want to be the first one there, not the last one there, because there's this cascade of lateness where, you might be the first one in at 8:00 in the morning, but if you have the 4:30 appointment, well, oh my gosh, you're still waiting there at 5:15 because everybody before you has been 3 minutes late and 5 minutes late, and it adds up. So if you can get the thing done, you just knock it off, you write the email, you make the phone call, you do what you need to do, then it's much better, because otherwise all of the chaos of the day, like you might have planned to do it at 5:00 at night, but just it has been swamped by the tsunami and it's never going to happen.
I love it. I hope somewhere in the book, The Long Game, the phrase cascade of lateness is in there, because that's really good. I wrote it down. I love it. This has been great. So I've just loved doing these 4 episodes with you. This is our last one together. The next one, I'm going to recap all this great stuff that I learned, apply it specifically to business development. Let me sing your praises a little bit more. But what do people do to take the next step with you? Based on this content we did right now, what's the next right thing someone should think about?
I appreciate it, Mo. That's fantastic. Well, one of the best ways that folks can stay in touch is through email. I have an email list, which in many cases and in many hands is a boring thing, but I try extremely hard for it not to be a boring thing. And in fact, Forbes did an article about the top email lists that you must subscribe to that actually have value for professionals. I was proud that mine was on it. So if folks would like to see for themselves, they can go to DorieClark.com/subscribe.
DorieClark.com/subscribe.
You got it.
We got it. And folks, I've been on the list for years. Not only do I glean insights from Dorie's emails, but I found a really great holiday present for my daughter on that list a couple years ago. And that gave us a chance to exchange, which is really good. So, I didn't expect benefits like that. I thought it was more professional stuff. And most of it is, I've gotten a lot out of Dorie's email list. But hey, when you can please your daughter and they think you're cooler, that's a pretty good benefit from something that can take 30 seconds. So Dorie, thanks so much for these 4 episodes. I've just absolutely loved being with you on these. You're always great. I had high expectations and this was even better than I thought it would be. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mo. Awesome speaking with you.